Welcome to Making Eating Healthy Again, the podcast where we simplify the complexities of modern nutrition and guide you back to the basics of wholesome eating. In today's world, dietary recommendations become a maze of conflicting advice and overwhelming research and trending fads that make eating healthy feel more like an unsolvable puzzle. Each day brings new headlines on superfoods, diet plans, and miracle supplements, leaving us more confused than ever about what we should really be eating. Join us as we cut through the noise to uncover simple, science-backed practices that can transform your health, delight your taste buds, and make eating healthy a joyous journey once more. Whether you're a seasoned foodie or just beginning your quest for better health, we've got you covered with insights, motivational stories, and practical tips. I'm Woody Huffines, and I am fortunate to be able to join registered dietitian Danielle Carr each week to talk to you about how you can make eating healthy again. Yeah. Okay. So we're back together after 3 weeks of a lot of personal excitement for me, and we talked about it. That my stepfather, we went to visit my stepfather because he was 86 and in poor health, and we didn't know how long he was going to last, and we wanted to go see him while we still could. Mm-hmm. And as we discussed before we got started, it ended up that he passed away in the middle of our visit. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole bunch about that informs how important this discussion has become for me. He was in, and I don't know all the names of the different. He was in an independent living facility, which means he had a little living room and a bedroom and a bathroom and a television. It's like a little small apartment, I don't know, 600 square feet or something. Just a little small apartment with some closet space and a microwave and a refrigerator. And
a little simple life.
And they had a meal area. They served meals, and they had all kind of activities and afternoon movies, and it was a really nice. It was a really nice facility. I don't want to call them out and say that they're bad people, which I'm about to do, but it's not their fault. So I won't mention the facility, but one of the really neat things that they have in the facility is like a guest apartment. So if one of the people that is living there has relatives come, they don't need to get a hotel room. They can just stay in the guest apartment. So you're there on site and your meals are included and everything. So that was just a real good answer for us because we were on the third floor. He's on the second floor. Go down some stairs and
sure, you're
you're there.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have to run back over to the hotel for something. It just made everything logistically a lot easier for us to spend time with him. Mm-hmm. But here's what's interesting. I was using the stairs. I would go up the stairs. I just used the stairs because there was only one elevator, and between walkers and wheelchairs, sometimes you could only get one or two people on the elevator because there wasn't enough.
Full.
It was a little full, and I'm fine with the stairs, and it was a lot fast. For me, it was just I'm faster.
Yeah. We
were there for, Monday through the following Wednesday. So Monday and Monday is 8 days. Tuesdays went, so 10 days.
Yeah, you were there for a while.
I never saw a resident on the stairs. And scared the bejesus out of staff members 2 or 3 times on the stairs because the staff member would be coming down.
Because they're not used to seeing
there's
other
somebody
people
on the stairs. It's like
you're not in scrubs. Yeah, who are you?
Yeah, it was for them. It was in 9-10 days. I saw the only people I saw on the stairs were staff members. So I'm using the stairs because it's faster and easier. And I never saw anybody on the stairs that wasn't a staff member. And when I saw staff members, I would frequently surprise them because it was obvious that the staff wasn't anticipating somebody on the stairs.
And sorry to interrupt, but you probably saw a lot of residents that you thought you're able to use the stairs?
Not very many.
Okay.
A lot of walkers.
Okay.
A lot of scooters.
Okay.
A lot of people who were having significant mobility problems.
Yeah.
And that's That's topic number 2. So topic number 1 is that we could eat meals there. And they would post, they had a little, like a little easel where they would put, here's the meals for today. And as you know, I only eat one meal a day. So I'm trying to pick which meal I'm going to eat in this facility. And there wasn't one meal in the day that I could eat.
Oh, wow.
And that's the first thing I want to bring up in this context, that one of the really important things about Make Eating Healthy Again, about the MEHA movement, about Bobby Kennedy and the USDA is the dietary recommendations. I never recognized how incredibly important those dietary recommendations are. Nina Teicholz in her book and in her subsequent work has pointed out that those dietary recommendations inform what goes on in school lunch programs, that goes on in prisons, it goes on in the military. Yeah. All of these diets that you put in hospitals and in schools and in independent living facilities are based on those dietary recommendations. There wasn't a meal where I could eat something and end up with less than 10 carbs in that meal. Not a meal. If they had fish, it was breaded. If they had a stew, I talked to the staff and they thickened it with cornstarch. That because of those dietary recommendations, I couldn't eat there, which was okay because we were having dinners with family. We would go out and I could find a steak or a hamburger or whatever. But that was the first thing that I wanted to tell you about when I got back. And I thought about you all the time that I was there is your profession and what you're restricted on doing. If that dietitian at this assisted or at this independent living facility went, hey, this is garbage. I'm going to quit feeding these people 250, 300 grams of carbohydrates a day. They get fired.
Yeah, so when I was doing my dietetic internship, so I did a dietetic internship in a master's program at Texas Tech. Oh, I got red and black on, guns up. So whenever you do a dietetic internship, you have to pick your focus. Is it food service, community, or clinical work? And mine was clinical because I wanted to stay at Tech, and there's another story into that. Even though I knew community would probably be my main where I would go. But I'm glad I did clinical because it is so incredibly challenging. So the point of me saying that is you have to have so many hours in the hospital. And it's still nowadays a lot of dietitians go into clinical work and then you kind of have to go, it seems like, clinical work. I think it's kind of changing, but clinical work after you pass your exam and you graduate and all that. You just get so much experience. But anyway, so in that clinical field, that's where I started to see what, like we've talked about before with the studying that I had learned, it was so carbohydrate based, very much food guide pyramid, follow the base, have all the grains. But I had already started to see, like, this doesn't make sense when I'm seeing these patients' blood sugar levels. Like, I'm looking at the menu and I see their blood sugar levels, their fasting blood glucose or their blood glucose postprandial, so 1 to 2 hours after their meals, and seeing how high their blood sugar levels were, especially patients that had diabetes. And the menu is loaded with carbohydrates. It's loaded with breakfast items like we've talked about before, pancakes, muffins. Maybe there's eggs on there, but everything is so high carb base. And then I did a few years at Big Baylor as a dietitian, and same thing. And I should go back in my internship. We also did some food service work where I was in education, and I almost went that route because it was so bothersome to me that the kids' foods in school, which is to this day still a thing of whole milk, French fries, pizza. The lady that I had, that was a mentor of mine in the food service area when I was in school, or working with the schools, had said, "Oh, sweetheart, it's not going to change for a long, long time." Because I had asked her, I'm like, this doesn't seem right. And her conversation with me, unfortunately, made me just be like, I'm not going to be a part of this. I feel like I could make no change in the way menus are in the food service industry with hospitals, rehab centers, kids' schools. It's really unfortunate. And those are the people that need it most, are kids. I mean, we all need it, but kids that have no idea what to eat. So they're going to look for, oh, this is good in school, I'm going to eat this. And then these poor patients, and especially when you're going through a tough time and your body's in stress and you see you're in the hospital, you're like, well, yeah, if pizza's an option, I'm going to have the pizza. Or if they say that I can have this big baked potato and a milk on the side and a fruit, that sounds healthy. I think that sounds good. And it's carb overload. Just like you said, you're eating like 60, maybe even, 75, 90 grams of carbohydrates. That blood sugar spikes, causes inflammation. We'll go into all that. So that's interesting in being an outsider and just being like, I just need something to eat.
I just need something to eat. I don't want to eat some carbohydrate laden and everything, you know, if they had a piece of meat or a piece of fish, it was either breaded or it's something that had carbohydrates.
Yeah.
They had there was a dessert with every meal, and it wasn't like fresh fruit. The dessert was something with wheat. I mean,
there's always the dessert option.
And I talked to the dietitian when I was there, and I was like, like, this is interesting to me. And he's like, that, well, you know, we've got the program, and this is, you know, this particular facility is nationwide. They've got places around the country. So they've got a corporate dietitian department, and that corporate, because of the Cisco and where their institutional food comes from, you know, they've got standard menus that they're going to do, and from a standpoint of cost control and consistency, that central planning group comes through and says, here's what it is. Now, what's interesting, the guest suite that we had was on the third floor, and it was right next to the gym where they had some exercise equipment. I mean, they didn't have anything that I was particularly interested in. It's not like free weights or something, but they had a treadmill, they had some stationary bicycles, and in the 9 or 10 days that we were there, I saw a staff member sitting in there twiddling their thumbs and looking at their phone by far more than I saw them working with one of the residents on that particular thing, which brings me to the second thing that I'm absolutely convinced now. You know, I've heard it before, but after being there and seeing the walkers and seeing the mobility issues and seeing the people that can't use the stairs, much less, you know, at mealtime, the hallway was full of walkers. I mean, there were 75 walkers down the hallway.
Yeah.
And they had one staff member that would go park walkers because the people that needed a walker, the parking lot, if you will, was so full that they would have had to walk too far without a walker to get to eat the meal. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Which brings me to the second thing that I'm absolutely convinced of now is that strength is life. Mm-hmm. If you do not have the ability to get up off the floor, if you don't have the ability to get up out of a chair without using your hands, if that mobility is dependent on strength, and strength is life. And the other thing that was interesting is talking to the staff. They have staff members there that help people. I mean, that you can hire or that you can pay to go in and check to make sure that people are taking their medicines. And I asked them how many metformin prescriptions they help with. And they said that every single person that they had been contracted to help with daily medicine had some kind of metabolic, insulin control, blood sugar control medication, every single one of them.
Yeah, you know, I think that's the real pandemic. The real pandemic is metabolic dysfunction. And most of the world does not know that we have some sort of metabolic disease or disorder or something that's not well within us. A lot of times until it's either too late, you know, and they need to be on medication, or it's almost too late. There was a recent study done a few years ago. I think it was Tufts University that has now found out that 93% of Americans have metabolic dysfunction. Whether that's high blood pressure, high cholesterol, adiposity with weight. What am I missing? Diabetes.
Central adiposity with syndrome X, or the metabolic syndrome, where you've got high blood pressure, you've got central body adiposity or obesity.
Yep.
or whatever, your waist is too big for your height. And that syndrome X piece that's interesting is that so many people focus on weight and weight alone, but not, a lot of skinny people have cancer. A lot of skinny people get heart attacks. A lot of skinny people have high blood pressure.
Sure. And I think they focus on weight alone, but also, if you go get your annual checkup, what do you get done? You get your CBC, your complete gut blood count, which is you get your blood glucose done, which is fasting. Great. Not to say that that's a bad measure, but so many times that can show up, your blood glucose can show up as normal. And it's not until it could be 10 to 15 years that you have high blood sugar that it's not going to show up until a certain point. Then you see, oh, wow, it's 200 or it's 140. Yes, I have diabetes or I have pre-diabetes. Really what we should be getting tested is your fasting insulin levels. What happens when you have your carbohydrate meal? How long does it take? How long does it take for insulin to get that sugar out of the cells and to get the sugar actually down? How is your insulin working? And a lot of times if we don't have that tested, we could have high blood sugar for 10 to 15 years and it doesn't really show up. And it's because it's habitual of doctors that have to get it done. It's because the American Diabetes Association says that we need to have fasting glucose, so they're going to follow those standards, right? It's cheap, it's easy, and it's just what they follow. I do think doctors are starting to realize that we need to have our fasting insulin checked. But our insulin is the metabolic disruptor. If our insulin's out of line, all of our hormones, like I've said, go into this domino effect.
And this brings us to what we were talking about before we started recording, is there's two things that we need to talk about next in this arc of the things that we discussed talking about. And that's what low carb eating is and why it's important. And the why it's important is really the insulin story within the body, which is what you've begun to talk about, is what is the insulin story? What does insulin do? How does it do it? And why do we not measure insulin? And what happens? What's the sequela of not measuring insulin? Because one of the things that we've talked about, and this is interesting to me, and this is something that it took me a long time really to get my head around. Science studies what it can measure.
Yeah, right.
If it can't measure it, it doesn't study it because it doesn't do it any good study. Science doesn't do any good if it studies something that it can't measure quantifiable effects from. So the ability to measure insulin lagged behind the ability to measure glucose by orders of magnitude. Diabetes was discovered and talked about by the Greeks and Romans. Diabetes was something that people knew about. It was a chronic wasting disease, but that they knew about a long time ago. And the way they diagnosed diabetes was to taste the urine of a patient. And they could taste the sugar in the urine, which meant that there was too much sugar in the body. So even before the idea of serum glucose measurement was around, they had a way to measure and quantify diabetes. And that was to have probably the assistant. I don't know if the physician was the one tasting the urine, but they could by the taste of the urine do that. It was a long time before we could measure insulin and didn't understand that insulin was what needed to be measured. So why is it so important to measure insulin?
So I think a lot of people think that insulin is just something, if you've read anything about insulin, that just brings your glucose down. However, it does so much more than that. It is, as I mentioned, the cascade of the hormone disruptor. If your insulin's off, all hormones, like a domino effect. Weight maintenance is huge. That's why we gain weight around our midsection, which can be a huge disruptor for or cause of heart disease. Thinking, like your brain, your brain health and neurodegenerative diseases, inflammatory responses. So insulin, we'll go back and we've talked about some of this in podcasts before, and I'm sure we'll say it many, many times, but anybody that's recently listening, or hopefully it'll kind of get in your brain if you've been listening to a few of these, is what happens when we eat these high sugar meals. You eat a high sugar meal. Let's say muffins in the morning or pancakes or let's say a sandwich for lunch, which is, I'm not saying a sandwich is bad.
Well, I think it's important to make the distinction here is when you say high sugar, you and I understand that high sugar means anything that is carbohydrate.
Yeah.
People, when you say a high sugar meal, people say, well, I don't eat a high sugar meal. I eat oatmeal.
Point.
I mean, my morning is oatmeal with a little bit of milk. I don't eat sugar in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Carbohydrates, your body can't distinguish between one kind of carbohydrate and another carbohydrate. So I think it's important to say
Yes.
it's not just sugar. Sugar's important, but it's also carbohydrates.
Yeah, that's a good point. I happened to grab this out while I was leaving the door today, and it's this bread that if kids have a sandwich, this is what they eat. And so one slice of bread is 22 grams of carbs. A lot of people you're not having one slice of bread if you're having a sandwich, right? You're having 2 slices of bread. So that's about 42 grams of carbs. So we're talking 3 servings of carbohydrates. We won't get into that right now. But that's carbohydrates. Thank you for clarifying that. It doesn't have to be just the sugar. So not saying that's bad. But okay, so you have this sugar meal. All right, what happens with the sugar? What happens with the glucose? That carbohydrate is glucose, and it turns to it's glucose in our bloodstream, or you could say sugar. So let's think of your bloodstream as doors. Well, insulin is that gland, that hormone that comes from the pancreas, and it's acts as a key to open the door. You're opening the door, you're getting that glucose, that sugar into the cells for energy. Most of it is stored as fat, and your body goes into fat storing mode. Okay, it's fine. We have another carbohydrate meal. We have another carbohydrate meal. That insulin is going up. It's going up. It's getting the sugar into our cells. And go. Well, what happens is eventually when we continue to do that and we're having the Pop-Tarts or cereal for breakfast with the milk, then the granola bar, the yogurt, again, not saying all these things are bad, the sandwich, with the bread, the pasta or hamburger bun at night, and we're constantly having these carbohydrates, that insulin, that key that continues to get that cell open or getting the bloodstream open to get that sugar in the cell, that key is eventually becoming corroded and just kind of like it's just not working anymore. So now that's when people start to see, okay, I'm getting my blood sugar taken and I have pre-diabetes or I have diabetes because our insulin receptors are not working. And when that happens, that's when we are really getting to issues with brain health, neurodegenerative diseases, inflammation. Here's one of the things that I really want to talk about, and just where my brain is going right now is, have you heard of advanced glycation end products?
Yes.
So the AGEs. And this is something that I think might resonate with people and help you understand, especially I think a lot of people are starting to understand that they care about their brain. We haven't really, right? We care. We've talked so much about weight and then people maybe being healthy, but I think people, especially with the mental health, there's so many mental health issues today, especially in kids. I think it's like 1 in 3 kids maybe has depression or would say that they have depression. I didn't know what that meant when I was younger.
And the number of people that are on serotonin reuptake, antidepressants and anti-anxiety pills and.
Yes. Yes. And so I think I'm glad that people are starting to be aware of, okay, I need to care about my brain, or how do I think better, or I'm tired of being anxious. I'm hoping a lot of people are starting to key into pretty much we can cure it with diet. I know that's a big statement, but what happens when we're eating this, we're eating these high carb meals, or we're eating refined sugars, let's go back and think of your brain as like this bustling city. You've got highways, you've got traffic signals, everything's going good. You're eating whole nutrient dense foods. You're eating things without barcode on them mainly. And these cars in the city are running smoothly. Neurons are firing. Everything's going really well in the brain. Well, when you eat this high sugar meal and you continue to eat these high sugar or carbohydrate meals, it's like pouring this sticky molasses over the road in this bustling city. Well, now you continue to eat those high sugar foods, and the protein, I should say the glucose, combines with your protein and your fat, and it forms like these like little tiny clusters, and those are called advanced glycation end products, AGEs. And these little tiny clusters all over your brain, You're thinking about your brain as being this city. It's forming like roadblocks and potholes all over this city. So now you got some traffic jams going on. And cars are there's traffic jams. Maybe the traffic signals are going out. Again, it's starting to get worse. It's starting to get worse. And the glial cells in your brain are not able, the like cleaning crew of your brain, aren't able to sweep all these cars out. There's nothing. So now it's really a mess. And you've got these cars stacked on top of each other and debris all over the road. And that's what's happening in your brain. You've got this inflammation. Again, neurodegenerative disorders. This is why people feel like they can't think well. They've got brain fog. They've got ADHD. This is where we're starting to talk about type 3 diabetes is Alzheimer's. And if we can start to understand, okay, that's what's going on with insulin. It's continuing this rapid fire of blood sugar. Every time our blood sugar goes up and it goes up at high amounts, we're forming these tiny clusters in our brain. And that's what's making all these things happen. And we can't think about all that.
And it's not just brain. One of the misapprehensions that people have about low density cholesterol. And I'm old. I remember when you wanted your cholesterol below 220, and that was it.
Yeah.
The guidance was you want your cholesterol below 220, don't eat eggs.
Oh yeah.
I mean, pretty much that was the extent of the cholesterol guidance. And then it was, okay, well, you really want it below 200 and don't eat eggs.
Yep.
And then it was, okay, there's LDL and HDL. And HDL is the good cholesterol and LDL is the bad cholesterol. So you want a higher HDL, you want your HDL above 50 and your LDL as low as possible. And you still want the total below 200. Yeah. And then it was, okay, well, like there's HDL and there's LDL and there's VLDL. And the VLDL is kind of protective and the HDL. And then again, as we've gotten better at measuring things, we have gotten better at understanding what that lipid profile looks like. Mm-hmm. And the LDL cholesterol, one of the things the only thing in LDL cholesterol that seems to be relatively good at predicting heart disease is particle size of LDL cholesterol.
Right.
And so you can do an NMR, which is a nuclear magnetic resonance test to size the size of your LDL cholesterol particles. Uh-huh. And then they graph it. And there's a graph, and there's type 1 particles down to like type 5 or type 6. And the type 5 or type 6 particles are the ones down at the very end, the very smallest LDL particles. The theory is that those very smallest LDL particles can get into the walls of your arteries in the heart and other places. And when they get into the walls of the artery, that creates inflammation. Mm-hmm. And then the body doesn't understand what it is that's and it looks to the body like an infection, and the body starts reacting to it with inflammation and an immunological response because it thinks there's a germ or something there, and it's really a low density cholesterol particle. Mm-hmm. And that since cholesterol is one of the things that does repair in the body, other cholesterols go try to repair the damage done by that small low density cholesterol particle that's very small. And it's the high number of small particles that really predict heart disease. Mm-hmm. Okay, so
not a lot of people know that.
And so,
or doctors.
Here's
I love
what's
that
interesting.
You explained that well.
The problem is LDL goes in cycles through the body. And it goes in cycles through the body, and when it goes through the liver recognizes, oh, that's an LDL particle. Got to fill that bad boy back up because cholesterol is in every cell of the body. Mm-hmm. Cholesterols and fats are what make up cell membranes. Cholesterol, without cholesterol, you would die quickly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the LDL particle comes back, and the liver recognizes it and says, okay, we got to process it and send it back out as an HDL particle, and then we can talk about the cholesterol cycle later. But what happens is, with all the things that happen biochemically in the body, like you just alluded to, there are receptors on cells, and those receptors there's a lock and key kind of mechanism, as you articulated, for insulin resistance. When the cells don't recognize and can't connect to the insulin as well because they've been glycated. Mm-hmm. The exact same process is true of LDL cholesterol. What makes LDL cholesterol go bad, get smaller, get more dense, become a disease-causing thing is glycation.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that those advanced glycation products are clogging up the neural pathways, glycation is what happens to those LDL particles that makes the liver not recognize that they're an LDL particle, because the surface of the LDL particle gets damaged by the sugars,
Mm-hmm.
and it gets glycation, and it gets, as you mentioned, junked up. So when it gets to the liver doesn't recognize, hey, I got to take this thing out of circulation and revamp it. So your curve of LDL and the more bad particles you have is directly related to how much sugar you have in your system.
Mm-hmm. It all comes back to sugar.
It all comes back to sugar. So here we've talked about mental acuity and sugar.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the cardiovascular risk that sugar causes. Okay. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about homeostasis and why insulin is important and what happens in the absence of insulin.
Okay, so I think we had mentioned this even last time, that homeostasis part. Your body should always be in homeostasis. Homeo meaning the same, stasis meaning stable. And especially our insulin levels, instead of this going up and down and up and down, we can think of it like our ancestors when they were and metabolically fit, of course. Have we seen pictures? Yes.
It's interesting. Michael Eads, sidebar, does a talk, and I'll put the link to go look at that. But he takes a bunch of pictures of sororities in the 1950s and fraternities in the 1950s and compares them to the sorority and fraternity pictures, because just thumbnail sketch in terms of level of education, in terms of socioeconomic state. That's a relatively good proxy for a quick and dirty look at how much bigger we are now than we were in the 1950s. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no. It's so when we think about our ancestors, they weren't eating multiple times a day. If they had to do that, they would die real early. They were hunting their food. They were getting their food. They didn't have these insulin spikes up and down and up and down. And now we're constantly, our body's in this state of going up and down, up and down. So we're out of this homeostasis state, meaning when we have these carbohydrate foods or we have sugar, it's going up, it's going down. And what happens is when it goes up, your body can feel this, and excuse me, I'll talk about when your blood sugar goes up and insulin spikes, you have this, maybe you have a rush for a minute. Ooh, I could talk about that right now. Let's bring these little blocks. It was not fun leaving the house with my 4-year-old and 2-year-old seeing these, my bag. They were like, why are you taking that? Are you not going to bring them back? Are you giving them away? Because I give a lot of toys away. Like, no, I'll come back. Anyway, so your insulin, when your blood sugar goes up and you eat a carbohydrate meal, or you eat something that's really high sugar, same thing. Let's talk like a thing with pasta, or we've talked about, I've said this many times, with breakfast in the morning, cereal, and then fruit on top of it. Oh, let's just do it like this. That sugar, right, is really high. That insulin, that blood sugar spike's really high. And it does exactly what we just saw. It just completely crashes. But when we can have something a little bit, steady carbohydrate, not much sugar at all. Maybe we're having eggs, what you made sure to give your stepdad, your eggs, sausage, maybe some cheese, maybe a little bit of fruit. We're starting to see that the blood sugar is spiking very slowly, and it's not going to come down as quick. Our brain is being fed well. We've got fiber maybe to help it go a little bit slower, and it just has a little spike. Anyway, when we start going through and we have these really high spikes up and down, we get fatigue, we get irritable. What happens when that blood sugar crashes? We get really irritable. We have mood swings. We get tired. We want to take a nap. Then we wake up again and we're like, oh, I'm hungry. So we go through these spikes up and down, up and down. We've talked about before, or what we just talked about with the advanced glycation end products. We get sticky membranes. There's all issues with that. When we have the absence of insulin and our insulin's like, I'm done. I cannot open this cell anymore. Well, now we've got type 2 diabetes. And that's when we have to get on that medication, because we need something. Our body needs something to bring that blood sugar down.
And the ability to bring the blood, as the insulin gets less effective, and that's one of the most, that was when the penny dropped for me, is if you measure insulin over time and compare it to blood sugar over time, your fasting insulin is going up long before your blood sugar goes up.
Mm-hmm.
Decades before your blood sugar goes up.
Yes.
Because as your body gets more and more insulin resistant, it has to produce more and more insulin to get the desired effect, which is to get the sugar out of the bloodstream.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been, your insulin has been high possibly for 20 years.
Yes.
30 years.
Yes.
Before, and you're metabolically dysregulated, and your doctor's going, yep, blood sugar's good. Yep, blood sugar's good. Yep, blood sugar's good. And the whole time there's this insulin increase that's indicative of that insulin resistance, so that the insulin is becoming less effective because the cells just aren't listening.
Which makes sense why when you're in your 20s or 30s or maybe 40s and you're spending the next 20 years thinking, I'm so tired. My hormones are off balance. Something's going on with my hormones. I can't figure it out. I'm breaking out. I'm gaining weight in my midsection. I can't figure out why. I'm tired. I have night sweats. I have hot flashes. I get migraines now. I have acid reflux. I'm eating the same as I used to when I was younger. And nothing's changing. Or I went back to how I used to eat when I wanted to lose weight, and I could always lose weight that way, and it's not happening. Well, it's because there's havoc in your body, and there's so much inflammation that your body isn't working with you, because we don't know the things that we really need to put in place, which can be, for sure, helping your body reset, maybe getting a low fat, low carb diet, and we'll talk about that later, or just letting your body metabolically reset, fasting.
And that's Jason Fung. If you're not familiar with Jason Fung, look up Jason Fung on the YouTube channel, or read his books. He's got a couple of great books. Jason Fung has started using fasting to treat diabetics. Jason Fung is actually a nephrologist, but most of the people that came to him with some kind of serious kidney dysfunction, that serious kidney dysfunction was in part due to diabetes, type 1 or type 2 diabetes. Mm-hmm. And so he's like, I'm not, this isn't working for me. I'm treating symptoms, but I'm not making people better. And he started using fasting to help treat the nephrology problems by treating the carbohydrate problems that we were having. He chose fasting because I think his practice is in Montreal, maybe Toronto. He has a significant Asian or Southeast Asian population. So when you try to tell people whose entire life is rice and cassava, and I mean, their entire world is based on carbohydrates, and you tell them, okay, you got to quit eating the stuff that you've been eating culturally, the stuff that you're eating, the stuff that you've always eaten, that wasn't happening.
Yeah, I know.
That wasn't happening. So he chose to do fasting as the treatment modality, because it's a lot easier for the population that he was in, for him to say, just don't eat, than to eat something other than these carbohydrates.
Yeah.
All about Jason Fung. So, but here's the point that Jason Fung made that was shocking to me as somebody who's relatively smart about this and has been for a long time, because I remember this with my kids. He's like, when we were kids, there was breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Mm-hmm. Period, paragraph. Mm-hmm. Now kids get up and they eat breakfast, and then they go to school, and there's a mid-morning snack, and then they have lunch, and then there's a mid-afternoon snack. And then they come home and they have dinner, or maybe instead of dinner, you go to soccer practice first. And one of the moms at soccer practice is responsible for bringing the granola bars or the juice boxes or the whatever else. That's another sugar carbohydrate thing that you have a snack after soccer practice before you go out, and you have dinner, and then you have a bedtime snack. Mm-hmm. And this thing that you're talking about is how the body over time can't continue to process the insulin signal and too much insulin, that's why you're having 12-year-olds with fatty liver disease. Because there's never a time during the day that their insulin is low.
That's right.
There is never a time during their day that their body's not fighting that homeostatic effect of trying to get rid of sugar, which the body recognizes as a glycation. Body recognizes that advanced glycation end products is a bad thing. The body recognizes that glycation of cholesterol is a bad thing. That's why it tries so hard to get rid of sugar. And from an early age, people are just overloaded with insulin all day, every day because of the way they eat.
Yeah, I read something a little while back that the number one reason for liver transplants now is fatty
liver disease.
Yep, non-alcoholic
fatty
fatty liver disease. And I think we've mentioned before on this that was it 60% of kids have fatty liver disease or some sort, or it's like they're right on the verge of it. And
it used to be called cirrhosis of the liver.
Yep.
30 years ago, if you went in with cirrhosis of the liver and you told the doctor that you didn't drink, he assumed you were lying. Mm-hmm. Because the only way you got cirrhosis of the liver was alcohol abuse.
Yep.
And now a friend of ours is a GI doc. A GI doc is seeing 10 and 12-year-olds with fatty liver disease.
Yeah, it's all processed foods
and carbohydrates.
And foods with sugar that people don't realize they're eating.
Well, and interestingly enough, now you're seeing, the childhood obesity, childhood fatty liver disease, that stuff has been around for a while. My wife, because she's a nurse anesthetist, does a lot of work with adults. Most of what she does is work with adults in pain centers or GI centers or plastic surgery or an orthopedic setting. So she doesn't have kids a lot. She doesn't interface with kids a lot and do anesthetic for kids. Here a couple of 3 weeks ago in an orthopedic setting, it was a non-emergency orthopedic surgery. And one of the things that you do, as you know, before you give an anesthesia, before you give an anesthetic, is you need to assess the patient and look at their body and everything that's going on with them to make sure they're healthy, because you're doing something that's potentially going to cause a problem if you're not healthy, or at least you need to understand what, if somebody has sleep apnea, that's going to affect the way they're breathing, which is going to affect their oxygenization. Yeah. So you need to know if they have sleep apnea, or you need to know if they have some heart arrhythmia, or you need to know these things. She had to call off a surgery to send a 12-year-old girl for a cardiac consult after looking at her EKG.
Oh, wow.
The girl was very overweight, but think about having to send a 12-year-old for a cardiac consult. Mm-mm. And that's driven, in my opinion, by that flood of insulin that we constantly have because of what we eat.
Yeah, and it's really sad. And to me, and don't take this wrong, if somebody is in that boat, I'm really sorry. I will pray for that. But it's child abuse, and I feel bad saying that. But please know what I mean by that is it's also not a parent's fault. Maybe if you know better, right? But the education just isn't out there. And that's why I love that we're doing this, because it's such a passion of mine, and I know it is for you, to help people realize, like, we just don't know that there's so many sugars and other things in our foods that is wreaking havoc on our system, that is causing all of these issues to come about. Go ahead.
The most horrifying thing that I've seen, I read Gary Taub's book, Rethinking Diabetes. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole lot about how we've managed insulin in that book, obviously, because it's about diabetes. But one of the things that last summer I saw that I did not know whether I was going to go off on this lady and yell and scream or just sit down and cry. We were at it was a political event, and it was kind of a little cookout, And so I'm standing there behind the table. I was helping out with the event, and I see this boy. I don't know. It's as I get older, it's harder for me to judge people's age because everybody looks like they're 12. But anyway, this young man was 10, 12, 13 years old. And he comes through the line and he gets a couple of hot dogs with hot dog buns and a handful of potato chips. And he gets 2 chocolate chip cookies, in the line. And then he goes over and sits next to his mom. And his mom pulls out a glucometer and checks his blood sugar and then looks at the meal and injects him with insulin to cover the carbohydrates that he's about to eat.
Yeah.
That is horrifying to me. And that in and of itself is it's like a little nutshell for how I think we are so sadly misinformed about how to treat this. This child obviously had what we used to call juvenile diabetes or type 1 diabetes, where effectively carbohydrates are a poison to him. And all of this glycation products and all of this stuff that we're talking about, all of these things that we're discussing that are the negative effects of sugar, instead of that mom going, dude, have a couple of hot dogs, no bun, skip the potato chips, and sure as hell don't have a cookie.
Yeah.
The idea is we want kids to feel normal and eat normally, so we're not going to restrict their carbohydrates. We'll just cover their carbohydrate intake with insulin. To me, that continuum that you talked about is this child abuse to feed your kid that way. If you know better, it is child abuse.
Yeah.
It may be unknowing child abuse, but to know enough to check blood sugar before you give insulin, and that our medical community isn't communicating that is horrifying to me.
Oh, sure. And it's not the parents' fault. It's not the kid's fault if you don't know better. That makes me so sad, even though, I've seen something like that so many times. And I think a person thinks, understandably, you think that the medication is going to cover that. So anybody that doesn't understand what that means is that, as he was saying, the insulin, you give yourself a certain amount of insulin to help bring whatever carbohydrate food, the amount of carbohydrate you're going to eat, to bring down. So whether it's, 15 units, 30 units, I'm out of that game. I don't remember the unit stuff. But it's, in the end, that doesn't mean that it's just getting the sugar out of your cells and everything is working appropriately. Like there's a reason why people don't like taking insulin. They don't feel good on it. It might make them feel nauseous. They feel sick. It's not also working with helping the kidneys and the liver and other parts of your organs. It might be helping that sugar come down. But it's sad that children are growing up with that, or the same thing with parents as well. I was going to say something else on that, and it slipped my mind, but or adults as well.
Well, you can't, and for me, it was that you can't burn fat in the presence of insulin.
Right.
Insulin's job in the body is getting sugar out of the bloodstream and putting it someplace. And that's it's after it fills up the glycogen stores in the liver and muscles, it's going to fat, period, paragraph. And if you have insulin in your system, you cannot burn fat.
Right.
Period. So if your insulin is continuously raised, even if you eat carbohydrates with fiber and you pay attention to the glycemic index, which I've got my own issues with in terms of glycemic index. If you do all the right things and eat the right kinds of carbs, that just means that the insulin, while not as high if you ate the wrong kind of carbs, quote, wrong kind of carbs, while the insulin may not as high, the total area under the insulin curve is just as big.
That's right.
And it's that total area under the curve that's my concern. Is I believe that minimizing the total area under the insulin curve is the path to health and longevity.
Sure. And for some people, that might not hit enough. But I think something that helps too is when you're in the presence of insulin, like you said, your body's in fat storing mode. It's completely out of fat burning mode. The other things that happens is this is why if we're eating high carbohydrate meals, we're thinking, well, I don't know, I'm just so hungry. There's no way. I just had it. We'll just say a client a while back say there's no way I could do it. There's no way I could do lower carb. And I was able to tell him or her, sure, it feels that way. That's understandable, because when you're in the presence of insulin, your ghrelin, we talked about this before, that ghrelin is that hungry hormone, the one that makes you feel like you're hungry, is raised. The leptin hormone, the hormone that says, the satiety hormone that says, I'm full, I'm good, I got you, we're good to go, that's completely diminished. And in the presence of the lipolysis, the breaking down fat is completely gone as well. So you're just stuck in this, like, yes, I'm hungry. And when we don't understand that, of course, it's going to feel like we can't do anything about it. I don't want to look at carbohydrates. I've tried this, I've tried this diet, and I just can't do it. That's why we feel that way, because we have the presence of glucose and insulin so much in our body that makes us feel like we're out of control.
And the thing that's interesting to me, and you and I talked about this before, and I think I think I'm going to start wearing a constant glucose monitor again, because I've started exercising. Because after I got religion about strength is life at the old folks home.
So this, okay.
At the old folks home. I mean, I've been convicted about carbohydrates for a long time, but the importance of doing some body weight squats every day, and maybe getting a kettlebell and doing some things to strengthen posterior chain and things like that have gotten really important to me.
Good.
But since I've been so sedentary for the last 5 years doing the business that I was in, I really want probably to go back to a constant glucose monitor to look at what the results of different kinds of exercise are to that glucose curve.
Yeah.
Because I pretty much watched food and seeing what food does. But the idea of bringing up the glucose monitor, or the constant glucose monitor, is, we talked about it's hard to measure fasting insulin, which is why it's taken so long for us to get to where we're measuring insulin instead of glucose. Do you think that a constant glucose monitor, I do. I mean, I absolutely think that every adult in the world should be required to wear a constant glucose monitor for 8 weeks. I mean, I think that just ought to be a requirement. It's like, okay, if you didn't get it up to now, I want you to see what happens to your glucose when you eat that.
Yes.
Because you can't unsee it. Do you think that is a way that we can start getting people to be cognizant of what insulin does and how insulin's important?
Yeah, I think it would be great. I know there are some people that are against them, or they think they don't. I think what some people might be against is they're worried that people might not understand them and how it works. But that's just where we can give some simple education. But yes, and I think that key word right there, like, what is insulin? I'm sure a majority of us can't explain what is insulin and why does it matter. But when somebody just knows that right away and they're like, oh, let me just see what it does. To me, that's 100 times more beneficial than even just start reading food labels.
You can talk about the theory from now to St. Swithin's Day.
Yeah. And
the theory is what the theory is. But when you are wearing a constant glucose monitor, and I mean, the interaction between ghrelin and leptin and cortisol and insulin and mTOR and all this long list of things in this complicated system that's our body to maintain homeostasis. There's a lot of education to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, look, when your phone goes like this, and everything underneath that line goes yellow or red, that means you ate too many carbs. That's a 3-minute conversation. Let me stick this on your arm. Let me get the app on your phone. When it looks like this, that's bad. When it looks like that, this is good. And I've talked to you about it. the experiments that I've done with the constant glucose monitor have been fascinating because of the differences in the way my body reacts to the way my wife's body reacts to the exact same foods the exact same way. But until we have a home insulin measurement, and it's like we have the home, glucose monitors are dirt cheap.
Yeah.
The sticks are dirt cheap. There's no good way to monitor and measure insulin at home.
No, there's not. And I think as long as people know, get a fasting insulin level, and it should be less than 5. That's where we really want you to be. But good to go back to your CGM. I think the other great thing about it is people will see that. They see it on their phone, but they'll also be like, oh, maybe that's why I'm feeling tired. Or that's why I'm so hungry. It's the reason why we can go eat a Chinese buffet I haven't eaten a buffet in I just thought about that. I don't know if I could do that now. It'd be good. Anyway, you could eat a buffet and you're like, I'm not eating till tomorrow, or I'm not eating all week, and you're done. And you fall asleep and you wake up 2 hours later and you're like, I'm so hungry. Anyway, I think that's the reason why you can see that on your phone.
I don't know if we've talked a little bit about my constant glucose monitor. The most interesting, the one that was the clearest, was the most extreme example. My blood sugar on a constant glucose monitor, and again, a constant glucose monitor does not measure serum glucose. Right. It measures interstitial glucose, which is the fluid between the cells, not the actual blood glucose. Mm-hmm. So there's minor differences in the reaction times and things like that. But the one that was amazing is I haven't had a donut since Christ was a corporal. I mean, I quit eating donuts 30 years ago. And one of my guys had bought a dozen donuts, and I had the glucose monitor on, and I was fasted. It was 2:00 in the afternoon, so I hadn't eaten since dinner the night before, so I'm fasted. My blood sugar's running about 85, and I was like, I'm going to have a couple of donuts and see what that does. My blood sugar went to 218 in 12 minutes.
Oh, wow. And did it show how long it took to clear that?
To 218 in 12 minutes. I was back down to 80 in about an hour and 5 minutes.
Okay.
And then it went to 60.
Wow. It just completely crashed.
Because my body was so unused to that many carbohydrates that my body went, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
And dumped so much insulin that I had the rebound insulin-driven hypoglycemia or low blood sugar because there was so much insulin excreted to take care of this bolus of sugar.
Yes.
That it drove my blood sugar low, and I was able to see, man, I'm starving to death, and look at the number and go, holy moly. I mean, my blood sugar's crashed because of that insulin and making that connection. And you can't unsee that.
No, and I think, like you said, it really helps you understand why you're feeling a certain way. And I think if we can understand why we're feeling a certain way, we can make changes. I had this happen, it was probably a couple months ago now. I never eat donuts either because I'm like, oh, sugar and fat together, not a good thing. And once I eat something, people are like, oh, you're so, it's easy for you. It is not easy for me. It drives me crazy when people say that. My husband will tell you, I have to have him hide chocolate chips in the house. If I'm making cookies, I'm like, you better hide those. I will eat that bag. If I have donut, I'm gonna want another donut. Anyway, I decided, I was like, I'm actually going to have a donut. And I enjoyed it. I was like, I'm going to enjoy this. I'm not going to feel guilty about it. I never take a nap. I wish I could. My brain just won't let me. Even if I need to, I will not do it. I took an hour and 20-minute nap. I couldn't believe it, but I didn't feel rested when I woke up. So anyway, my point of saying that is this was at a mom's church group I'm a part of. It was like 4 weeks later, we were there and there were donuts. And it was nice to be able to be like, I really want a donut. I hadn't eaten, but I didn't do it. I went for the eggs and I forget what else they had there. But just that feeling and that knowledge, right? I believe knowledge is power and power is control. And knowing like, I don't want to crash later. I've got to, for someone, if it's work, for me, you've got work. I've got the 2 kids. Like I had stuff going on, like doesn't matter what I had going on. I don't want to feel that way. And again, that knowledge is power, power is control. And so now when I go places, it's not going to say I'm not going to have something. I'll never have a donut again in my life. But it's just knowing like, no, I don't, that's not worth it to me.
And so the importance, all that we've talked about is the importance of how insulin is the hormone that does all, hence insulin is maybe you could call it the king of metabolic control.
Yeah, sure.
There are a lot of other, I mean, like any king can't get everything done by itself. The king has to recruit a bunch of others to get things done. And homeostasis, in terms of your blood sugar, while driven by insulin, also has a whole bunch of other hormones and processes and pieces in place that drive the feedback mechanisms to get you back to homeostasis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So insulin is incredibly important. It's important for life, and it's important for good metabolic health, and it's important to learn to control insulin. Mm-hmm. So last piece, why do you think it's so hard for the medical and dietitian community to shift gears and think about root cause of all of this, which is insulin, as opposed to just defaulting to the carbohydrates and the kind of carbohydrates that you need? And you need all these carbohydrates, and not being able to make that shift to the understanding of why insulin's important and how you manage insulin.
Yeah. I think, so with the insulin route or getting the blood glucose checked, I think that dietitians, anybody in the medical field, doctors, maybe pharmacists, I mean, there is, and I know I mentioned this before, it's the habit of saying, well, you need to get your blood sugar checked. And we just stay with blood glucose. It's a habit. It's easy. It's in the panel. It's paid for. It's funded. ADA, like I mentioned, says this is what we need to do. To make change on that and to add another model to that and have people understand that and explain it isn't there.
It's just a lot of institutional momentum.
Yeah. Yep. And I say I think it's changing. I think that's what I see, right, in my algorithm and what I read and what I research, but I don't know. I don't know how long that's going to take to get there. And then on the food part, you had asked, like, why do I think it's taking dietitians, doctors so long to change on that? Same thing. And I think it's funding, and I think it's marketing, and doctors, dietitians. I mean, we're so ingrained in the food guide pyramid still to this day, in eating what's easy and what's quick. Or I still think people are following this low fat model or low cholesterol or caring about the calories because they might see a little bit of change in people, but they're not really working on what's the metabolic route of this person. What's the root cause of the issue? There's
an Upton Sinclair quote that's one of my favorite quotes among all the reading that I've ever done. And Upton Sinclair said, "It is very difficult to get a man to understand something that his salary depends on his not understanding."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think there is so much financial incentive across the board to continue to do what we're doing, from big ag to big food to big pharma. I mean, the gold standard, Callie Means talked about this with Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan and a bunch of other people. For the pharmaceutical industry, the gold standard marketing opportunity for the pharmaceutical industry is a sick child.
Yep.
If I can say that obesity is a chronic disease and the way to treat that chronic disease is this pill, and in the same way that mom was injecting insulin to cover that kid's carbohydrate load, if I can come up with a pill that this kid needs to take every day for the rest of his life, that is the marketing boon of all times. And so while I think there is a bunch of institutional inertia to continue this, because you got to go relearn something, I think it's going to be very difficult to get people to relearn it, because, and here's the point that I would make, that it's the simplest. I mean, you can you can fashion a conspiracy theory behind this pretty easily. And I will say that it seems that us conspiracy theorists are 17-0 on the road. We've been winning a lot in the last several years. I'm just saying. But you can fashion a conspiracy theory. But the simple fact of the matter is, if I tell you to eat low carb, which is what we'll talk about next, is eating low carb and how you do that. But if I tell you to eat low carb, who's making money on that?
Mm-hmm.
How do you make money on telling people to eat low carb? And the answer is you really don't. Because the things that are low carb are the things that are healthy. Okay, if you talk about broccoli, how do you market broccoli as a differentiator? If you're talking about corn, you got corn oil, you got corn chips, you got corn flakes, you got corn bread, you got corn meal, there's 1,000 different ways to make money on corn.
Right.
With processing and everything else. How do you make money on broccoli?
Mm-hmm.
How do you differentiate to say the General Mills broccoli is better than the Nabisco broccoli?
Right.
It's broccoli.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was like about to, when you asked that question, I was stumbling. I'm like, okay, I need to redo all of this, because I almost said, can we just stop this and re-say that? Because you're so right. It's so much funding. And I think in the way that we're taught and the way that we think is, what can I add to my diet? Oh, blueberries are the next thing. Blueberries are full of antioxidants, and that's what's going to help decrease the risk of Alzheimer's. So I have blueberries every single morning. It is so much harder to take things out of our diet versus just thinking, oh, what do we need to put in? So one, it's harder. And two, we're marketed because of especially all this funding. That's why now there's so much funding on blueberries, which blueberries are really great for you. But people were just so into like, oh yeah, let me add. There's not so much in this talk of taking it away.
And there's so little talk, I would say almost zero talk, about how you need to manage insulin. I haven't heard any of the popular influencers or diet people outside of the low carb or keto communities talk about insulin. I'm not. It's like that whole branch of the discussion is just not brought up. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed that we spent some time today talking about what insulin does. We can't live without it. But managing insulin is about managing our metabolic health, and managing our metabolic health is about managing our health. Mm-hmm. And as we move forward with the podcast, that's one of the things that to me is the most difficult in talking to my family or friends, because as one of my friends said, it's like, you tell me to lose weight, I should go low carb. And you tell me to get better mental clarity, I should go low carb. And you say that if I've got gout, that the answer is low carb. And if I've got psoriasis, the answer is low carb. And if I've got high blood pressure, the answer is low carb. And it's like, there's some kind of snake oil thing. It's like anything that you say, any health, anything, it all comes back to low carb. And I think it's important to recognize that maybe, as you've articulated it today, it's not whether it's low carb or not low carb, it's how do you get your body into a metabolically healthy state? Mm-hmm. And there's a bunch of different ways to do that, but that's the goal. And that it's not that low carb solves psoriasis, and that low carb solves inflammation, and that low carb it's not that low carb solves those things. It's that low carb is the key to metabolic health. And the key to metabolic health is managing your insulin and your insulin response.
Yes, beautifully said. That's a good wrap on that.
Perfect.
The
next time we'll talk about how to do low carb.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. Yep.
We'll talk next time.
All right.